Hi, I'm Beth Jarvis, and I'm a good friend of Chip Yerskis, a pastor here at Jupiter First. And if you know Chip, you know that one of the best things about Chip is that he likes to connect someone to more loving people. And that's exactly how I feel today. I feel like I've been connected to a whole group of loving people here at Jupiter First, and I'm just so excited to be here with you today, so thank you. Getting to know some of you through the lectionary lab or some of the online classes has just been a lot of fun. Even though it's remote or through video, I have really felt welcomed by you guys, and I just want to thank you for that. So my hope is that today you will also feel encouraged and welcomed by the Word of God in our lives. Whether you are in the sanctuary right now, or in your car, or on a phone, or it's another day of the week, I hope you feel the presence of peace and love with you right now. Because none of us are alone. By grace, we are connected. Through God's love, we are welcomed into the presence of God every day. That is the holy welcome that every day holds for us. And it also invites us to a unique kind of service. And that's what I want to talk with you about today. Because of Chip, campus ministry has been a part of my life for a long time. I first met Chip at Bread Coffee House at Emory University in Atlanta, and I've never been welcomed into a house by anyone like that before. He was so genuinely excited to serve me and my friend iced coffee. Milk and coffee was kind of going all over the place, but it didn't matter because the three of us were just so instantly into conversation about faith and hospitality. And then he offered us fresh baked cinnamon rolls. And I was like, where am I? And then I looked around and I saw this massive chalk wall with a mission statement that took up the whole entire wall, and there was art everywhere. But the mission statement basically just summed it down to, when talk is cheap, our sermon is hospitality, and there are no strings attached. And there was something about the power of being welcomed in that way that I absolutely believed the writing on the wall. There was no confusion. I knew instantly that it was real and that they weren't lying, and I was hooked. I got to work with Chip for a couple of years, and then that work eventually opened up the door for me to go to seminary at Emmanuel Christian Seminary at Milligan, where I am coming to you today, and then to also start a new campus ministry in Tübingen, Germany. I came back to the States after 8 years, but that ministry in Germany has now become 3 ministries across 3 universities in southern Germany. And today I work at Emmanuel Seminary right here, and I get to help other ministers, and all that from iced coffee. The power of an unconditional, no strings attached, come exactly as you are, you can belong here kind of welcome, always has ripple effects in our lives and communities around us. That's the power of God's grace, and neither distance nor death can hold it back. And something like that kind of message is what Jesus is trying to explain to his disciples in today's gospel reading. The power of God is a major theme in the Gospel of Mark. Power, see if this sounds familiar, was something that some people had a lot of, while others had very little. But the power of God, the power that Jesus demonstrated and talked about, seemed different to people. It always seemed to be about welcoming and loving and healing others who couldn't give anything back to Jesus or his disciples. And in our reading this morning, Mark chapter 9, verse 35, Jesus even says, "Whoever wants to be first must be last and must become a servant of all." Here was power being associated with something as gentle as service. This must have been confusing. And every time someone wanted to draw lines around the power of God, Jesus did or said something that revealed there were no limits or lines to be drawn. At the beginning of the campus ministry in Germany, we had met a lot of students by just going to where they were hanging out and becoming friends. We had this one event called Cafe English where we ate American chocolate chip cookies, watched a TV show, and helped students with their conversational English. It was a great event. But we were quickly becoming known as the student group with English and cookies, and that wasn't all we really wanted to be known for. Our hope was to be a community not centered on a skill, but a community that opened up the possibility for students to talk about faith and ask questions about God. We just wanted to give students the possibility to ask a question about God and have a cookie. And because it was important to not do this whole bait and switch, we created a completely separate event where we were upfront about how this night would be different. We would talk about our relationship with God. It was called Donnerstagabend, which just means Thursday night. It's a very creative name. And it quickly became the program in our minds. Every team member got what we called a flow sheet. It stated very clearly when the food was to be served, the lights, the sound, when the band should start, the skit, and then the ever important talk. Everything had to be great. The food, the music, the sound, etc. And the talk had to be amazing. The talk had to be open and authentic, funny, but not too funny, simple, but also say something interesting about God and who God was to us, but not complicated or over theological. It had to hang together with a theme and clear transitions, but not feel too overly worked, and stay transparent, all in under 10 minutes. In our minds, the program grew to such great importance that we started to serve this little sheet of paper called the flow chart, or the order of service, as some might call it, it dominated us. This thing that we created to serve us, we did this to ourselves. And it was only the second or the third time that we had done a Thursday night, and a student was there early helping us kind of set up. And the student didn't believe in God and wasn't really into our whole idea of what we were doing, but he loved music and just enjoyed hanging out, and he was going to help us lead the band that night. The food was ready, and other students were slowly starting to come in, but instead of welcoming, our team was out on the other side of the house, starting just to review the flow chart for the evening. And there we were, just kind of starting to bicker among ourselves, like, who will make sure the lights are low for the video? Are the curtains closed? Who checked and corrected any typos on the PowerPoint? No one? Whose job was that? Who didn't do that? We were completely stressed out and arguing when the student came around the house to tell us that others had arrived. He saw our stress. He said, "Wait, why are you so stressed out? Thursday night is not about a performance. It's like a family barbecue. It's about food." We were all stunned. There was something about the genuine way he approached us. It wasn't judgmental, but with a gentle concern. And I believed him. We knew we had started to attach requirements and conditions to the night. It was quickly becoming about us, our leadership, our performance, which meant at some point we would have probably expected someone to clap and appreciate our amazing program. Because when perfection becomes the goal over relationships, it's only natural that ambition leads to expect gratitude. And that's not what it means to be a minister. That's not what it means to be in community. So here we were, the professional ministers, being told by someone who didn't believe in God how the night should go. And he was right. We thought the height of our work was a program, and because of that, we couldn't see that the heart of our work was to welcome others and be welcomed ourselves into the community. You can't welcome others when you're trying so hard to control the order of everything. After that night, we asked the same student, "Okay, well, what should this event look like?" And he said, "Thursday nights should be like a family reunion. There's food and fun games and music and still some kind of program of sorts, but it flows and everyone's relaxed, even you guys." Well, this drastically changed our style. We still created a little flow chart for the evening, but we kept it simple. There was a start time, but then all the other times on the flow chart just had question mark, question mark, question mark. And we each made sure the whole team had time to just sit down and eat with folks. We got good at going with the flow of the room and the evening. We also learned to share the talk. We still wanted the talk to be good. We still gave it our best, But we also started writing themes and talks together as a team. There was no one talk person. We decentralized the team because we were all co-pastors. And Thursday night became like a family reunion, which made it possible to talk about God and ask more questions. And people grew in their faith and they changed, us included. And I will always be grateful to that student who had no filter or inhibitions and just broke through our little planning meeting session just to tell us what was up. And our readings this morning is actually sandwiched between two healing stories. In these healing stories, we see the disciples also struggling with ambition around perfection. First, the disciples have tried to heal a man's son and failed. So the man brings his son to Jesus and says, I've tried everything. I tried to get your disciples to heal my boy, and they can't. So Jesus asks for the boy to be brought to him, and he asks the father more questions about the boy's health and the length of his illness. And the man eventually says, can anything be done? And Jesus responds, with faith, all kinds of things can be done. And the father cries out, help me of my unbelief. And the boy is healed, and the demon leaves the boy. And the disciples, seeing all of this, they ask Jesus, why couldn't they heal? What was up? And Jesus says, you forgot to pray. In the second healing story, the disciples have heard that someone else is casting out demons in the name of Jesus. So the disciples come up to Jesus and say, hey, someone that we don't know, hasn't been hanging out with us, is out there casting out demons in your name. And Jesus says, let him be. Don't stop him. Whoever is not against us is for us. So in these two healing stories that kind of sandwich our reading this morning, we have questions about power. The disciples seem to think that they should just have it just by being in proximity to Jesus. And the growth of this Jesus movement is starting to kind of feed some unhealthy ambition, as we see in our reading today. And maybe this is why they start arguing about structure and who is greater. They're already sensing a lack of control, and their understanding leads them to argue. They are on the road together. And for the second time, Jesus gives them a brief summary of the mission. Hey, the Son of Man, spoiler alert, that's me, is going to be betrayed. Humans will kill him, but after 3 days, he will rise again. It's one of the shortest and simplest versions of the Passion narrative, and the disciples say nothing. In Mark chapter 9, verse 32, it reads, but they did not understand what he was saying, and they were afraid to ask him. Which, to be fair, Jesus just said really weird things about dying and rising again. And maybe their avoidance is a desire to ignore a future that doesn't sound so promising. So they continue down the road, and they come to a house in Capernaum, and Jesus asks them a question. And in the Jewish world of this time, the disciples usually ask the teacher questions. So Jesus reverses things here when he asks about their conversation on the road. And we can maybe make some assumptions here about their lack of asking questions as a weakness on their part, but it's also a sign that Jesus is already moving into the posture of the servant in this scene and not the leader. And I think this is a moment where Jesus meets them where they are and provides the question for them, starts the conversation for them, just to try and get things going. So, what were you talking about on the road? And the disciples seem to have a kind of understanding that a new kind of kingdom is coming. And they remain silent because on the road they were arguing. And they are not interested in telling Jesus that they are worried about the succession plan. Who will they listen to? Who will guide them to make decisions? Who will be the leader of all? Who will give the talk? And their lack of understanding has led them to argue about who is the greatest, because surely, by now, one of them is greater. Jesus' response to this line of thinking is to just sit down. He says, whoever wants to be first must be last and a servant of all. And then taking the posture of a teacher now and sitting, he doesn't call the disciples to him. He doesn't pick out one or two of them. Instead, he calls a child. Ouch. Children are not thought of here as cool and innocent and adorable little creatures. In the Greco-Roman hierarchy, they are below the poor, below women. They are invisible until they are ready to produce something meaningful for society. So Jesus says, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me." As I've been thinking about these verses, I just happened to be visiting my sister-in-law and spending some time with her family and my two nieces. And because of COVID and the distance of them living in Portland, Oregon, and us living here in Johnson City, Tennessee, the children didn't know my husband and me. We'd never really met. So the first day was a little weird because the kids had only known us through Marco Polo and video chat. So it was like, ooh, you are alive. But as you know, kids can be just so quick to move through any kind of social inhibitions. So by the second day, my 4-year-old niece was meeting me at the door when I woke up in the morning. Now, I pride myself on being an early riser, but I got nothing on a 4-year-old. The energy and pure joy that she had at 6 a.m. was impressive. At the time, I thought to myself, I really was planning on getting some work done. I was going to do some research about how Jesus told his disciples to welcome a child. Yes, I noticed the irony there too. Even though this is not how the first readers would have heard or thought about children, when I hear welcome the child, it's hard not to think of my niece now. Here is this full of joy, no fear, no filter, wonderful human being who is also vulnerable and still trying to figure things out about the world and her emotions and all the people around her. But unlike us, her lack of understanding just leads to questions. So many questions. But that's what it means to become a person who knows how to welcome all people. Jesus asked questions. He asked people he was about to heal to tell them their story, to tell him their story. And he didn't have to do that. But with Jesus, there's always time to listen and ask questions. All the tasks and all the healing, they still get accomplished. And with Jesus, we see that the power of hospitality comes not just in the food, but in the welcoming space of being able to ask a question and listen. And when we forget or when we let fear of losing control trap us, there are people like my 4-year-old niece and the student in the campus ministry in Germany to welcome us back to the gentle reality that we are already at a family reunion. A reunion that we did nothing to deserve and will keep going even without our flow charts. That is the power of God's grace. As a child, God welcomes us and calls us to be servant of all, tasked to welcome others in the name of the risen Christ. And welcoming in the name of Jesus means setting aside our own concerns for status and welcome all with unconditional love. That's what that means. So we might also be asking, well, that's what that means for me and the few people around me. But what does this mean for the church today? There's a lot of questions about how to do church right now. Questions about what should we give up from before COVID, or what should we keep doing from what we're doing now? And there's probably some fear and ambition wrapped up in what we should let go of or what we should hold on to. But maybe it can really be as simple as this. It can be about food. It can be about finding ways to eat together and worship and serve together on the same level. The word that Jesus uses in this morning's text for servant of all is diakonos, our word for deacon. He doesn't use the word for slave. He chooses a more simple and gentle word, a word also used for someone who waits on tables. Later, this word will be taken up and used as an official ministry title, and it's still used in many of our churches and traditions today, deacon. But here it is for us today, in a very basic image. A deacon or servant is someone who knows how to welcome. Whoever wants to be first must be last and must become a deacon of all. Our path forward could be as simple as this. Welcome. Here's a table. Here's a meal. Everything has been provided. Can I join in with you?